On this screencast, we want to talk about how we graph box plots, and we want to talk about how to graph these using our graphing calculator. But before we do that, let's review the idea of what box plots are and how they're made. They're made based on 5 numbers of a finite, relatively small set of data. And the first of those 5 numbers is the minimum value. So we'll put a mark there for that. And then we have the box. And the box begins at the first quartile and ends at the third quartile. And somewhere in between those two quartiles is the median. And then finally, we'll mark the maximum value. And then we'll attach the minimum and maximum values to the box with 2 lines which are commonly called the whiskers. So that's what we want to do. Let's take a look at an example here and see how we can do this with our graphing calculator. All right, so it says the 9 largest oil reserves by country in 2000 are shown in the table. Graph a box plot of the data. So we see we start with Saudi Arabia with 261 billion barrels, and then we go all the way down to Libya and Mexico with 29 billion barrels in oil reserves. So the first thing we want to do is to put the data in our calculator, those 9 numbers. I went ahead and took the liberty of doing that. Let me show that to you. So we'll call up our calculator and hit the Stat button and press number 1 for edit. And let me switch to the large screen so you can see it. And so there's the all 9 data items are in the calculator now. Now let's go ahead and set up our calculator to graph a box plot. To do that, we want to hit the second key and then Y equals to get the Stat plot menu. Let's go ahead and put our box plot in plot number 1. So I'll just hit the number 1 key. And we want to turn this plot on, so I'll just hit enter to highlight on. And then we want to pick the type of graph we want, the type of plot. And we find the box plot in the second row in the center position. So now we can just scroll along through and highlight the box plot, hit enter, and then we want to specify where the data is. We have our data in list number 1. That's what's shown here. We would change that if we had our data in another list. And so it looks like everything's set up. So I'll hit second and quit. Second and the mode key to get quit. And now let's use our calculator to adjust the viewing window for us so we don't have to do it to actually graph the box plot. To do that, we'll hit the zoom key and then scroll down till we get to option 9. Notice there option 9 says zoom stat. That's set up for graphing our statistical data. So now I'll just highlight 9 and hit enter. And there we see our box plot. Now, let's take a look at the values of the 5 number summary, and then we'll make a few observations on this box plot. To see what the 5 numbers of our 5 number summary are, we'll just hit the trace key. That's right next to the graph key on the top row of keys. And notice here we find the median is 90, and that was with the 5th country on the list, Iran. Now, if I use the left cursor key, and I tap that a couple of times, that gets me back to the minimum number of 29. That was for Libya and Mexico. And then if we scroll to the right, we see the first quartile of 39. And then we saw the median. And then the third quartile is 103.5, because notice we have to take the mean of the second and third values to get the third quartile. And finally, if we scroll to the right one more, we get the maximum value, 261 billion barrels. That was for Saudi Arabia. Now, finally, just to interpret this box plot, we see that there's a long whisker on the right side here. That tells us that our graph is skewed to the right. It tails off to the right. And that's because we have one country which has a very large oil reserve. So that's how we make a box plot